Hi everyone, you've joined into the webinar we want to take you through today. So you want to join the League of Geospatial Superheroes, and this is your quest. So I'm here with Dr. Joseph Kerski, and my name's Nathan Hazelwood, and I think we'll make a start. So thank you for taking the time to join us today, and we hope you learn some things and get something out of this event. So some of the things that we want to talk to you about today, we want to look at things like how to write a good GIS CV and how to plan for doing a GIS interview. And so we're kind of going to have a bit of fun today and have a bit of a superhero theme running through the presentation. So hopefully you'll enjoy this. And I'll hand you over now to my esteemed colleague, Dr. K, to tell you a bit about himself.
Well, many thanks, Nathan. It's always a joy to be with you, Nathan. Nathan and I, folks, conducted a webinar on geospatial careers some years back, and we thought, lots has changed in society, education, technology, expectations of what geospatial technology can do in society. So we thought this would be an ideal time for a new webinar for you all. We intend to inspire, inform, and also hear from you what some of your challenges are navigating the water. So we're going to build some time at the end of this 3-hour session. Just kidding. We don't have 3 hours. At the end of this short session together, where we hear from you as well, where we're going to build in some buffer time there. I am very pleased that you all are here as well. I know it's a busy time of year for many of you. We are just honored that you're here. I've actually been in 4 different sectors of society. I'm going to share this with you because I hope it's inspiring in 2 ways. I've been in nonprofit, government, academia, and private industry. I serve on the ESRI education team, which serves universities, colleges, schools, libraries, and museums, and after-school programs. So anywhere education is happening, that's where we support and encourage through curriculum, data, and networking. I'm hoping that's encouraging because, number one, it shows that you don't have to be in the same organization your whole career, as I've demonstrated in mine. You can move around. And secondly, I hope it's encouraging in the following way, and that is spatial thinking and geotechnologies is going to be valuable no matter what area of society you happen to be working in and no matter what organization you happen to be working in. So I hope it's encouraging in 2 ways. Thanks, Nathan.
Great, thanks, Joseph. So just to introduce myself, Nathan Hazelwood. I work for GeoTechnology, where I'm a principal GIS consultant. I do a lot of geospatial strategy work for large clients these days. But a bit about my background. So I've actually been doing GIS stuff for about 30 years, 30. So quite a bit of experience. Hopefully I've learned a thing or two in all of those years. And I started out working for the New Zealand government, our national mapping agency, which is now called LINS, which is the equivalent of the USGS in the United States. I then actually worked for an aerial photography company and was, for a time, was the aircraft navigator, actually working out where to fly the aircraft to take aerial photography. So, that was quite an interesting job. And then I've basically travelled around the world, working in different countries, doing GIS primarily in the UK, but also spent quite a bit of time in Portugal in particular. So I've had a pretty interesting career, and I think, if I do say so myself, and it's been a lot of fun. So hopefully we can give you some tips today so that all of you can launch your careers and get into the GIS industry and enjoy all of the good things about it. So just a couple of notes while we're getting started. One thing, if anyone's joined late and you just want to put into the chat where you're dialing in from, we'd love to see all of the people there. Hi, Joshua and Hamilton, and fantastic to see people all around the world. Another thing, just a note, this is a bit of a rogue mission that Dr. Kerski and I are doing today. it's kind of our own personal opinions and things that we're going to talk about, so it doesn't necessarily reflect the views of our employers. So we're doing this because we love GIS and we love geography, and we kind of want to help the community and help you guys if we can. So, just so that we can speak freely about things. We're kind of doing this out of our love for the community rather than being something that we're doing as part of our employment. So just bear that in mind. There is a Q&A function, and so if you want to ask specific questions, maybe if you use that rather than chat, but if you want to comment on anything, then feel free to use the chat as we go through. We'd love to get some feedback, and we'll try and deal with some of your questions on the way through this session. If we can't do that, if we run out of time, then we'll write a blog post or something and try and respond to some of your questions after the session. So please, if we don't respond to all of your questions today, we do think your questions are important, and we will respond in some way to those questions. So some of the things I'd like to get started talking to you all about is the characteristics of a good resume, or some countries might call it a resume, other countries might call it a CV or a curriculum vitae, the sort of information about you that you put in for a job application. So some of the characteristics that we need with that, it has to be short and concise and super tiny. It needs to be quick for a manager to read it, and the wording of it needs to be really strong. Some of the things that you need to realize with putting in CVs is, I'm a manager and I do a lot of hiring of staff and things like that. And if I get a stack of 50 CVs to look through, they need to be short, because I haven't got time to sort of read through a whole lot of CVs, and so I'm gonna just pick the ones which are short and concise and grab my attention a bit. So if you've got a 7 or a 10-page CV, that's going to start to put me off from hiring you kind of straight away. Maybe if it's got some really good stuff in there, I might catch my interest and I might read it. But these CVs need to be super focused, super quick to read, but you really need to have those strong points in them. Another really important thing to understand when putting in CVs for GIS jobs is that the first challenge that you're going to reach is that your application is not going to come to the GIS manager straight away. It's probably going to go to someone like an HR officer or a recruitment officer first, and they generally won't know anything about GIS. And quite often they're doing a shortlisting process, so they will only be looking at if they've got 100 applications that come in, they might be going to whittle that down to 10 applications to pass on to the GIS manager, who's actually going to make the final decision. So you need to make sure that you're going to be able to get past that gatekeeper. And so in order to do that, what you need to think about doing is stealing their magic keywords that they are looking for and using them against them. So some of the ways of doing that, if the job advertisement is your clues to working out what you want to respond to. So if even little things, like if all throughout the job advertisements, if they talk about geospatial and in your CV you've got GIS, I mean, we all know that those two things are the same thing. But an HR officer might not know that. So this is just an example of how reading what's in that job advert and responding using the same language as the job advert is really important. And this is even more important now because quite a lot of organizations have got AI doing that first pass of looking at your CVs. And that AI is doing the same kind of thing. So in order to beat the AI, we need to think like the machine, and we need to work out what the keywords are that the machine is using in order to get past that AI gatekeeper, so that you're your job application goes through to the hiring manager. So something that's really important with your CV is that first half of the first page is where you need to get in your biggest hits. You need to get your strong points right at the start so that the people reading it are going to be more interested and decide to keep on reading the rest of your CV. So some people who are hiring, particularly if they've got 100 CVs to read through, 50 CVs to read through, they will start to weed out people based on that first section of your CV. So what you need to think about doing is getting your key strengths mentioned on that first part of the first page. And sometimes the best way of doing that might be to use some bullet points in that first section so that you're picking out your really strong points and getting the people that are reading it interested to carry on reading the rest of your CV. Another really important thing to do is you've got to be ready to make fast changes to your CVs. So you've got to mimic what the job ad is saying. And if they're asking for a particular set of skills which are important for a particular role, then you need to be responding to those skills that they're asking for. So if in the job advertisement it says something like, we need communication skills as part of this role, you need to respond somewhere in your CV about your communication skills. And one of the tips that I would have is that quite often in job adverts, they kind of list the skills that they want. And so if you take those headings that they've given and use them as headings in if you take those skills that they have asked for and use those as headings in your CV, even in the same order as what the job advert has said, then, when the HR officer or the GIS manager looks at the job advert of what they're looking for and then looks at your response, it makes it really easy for them, right? Because they're looking for communication skills and database skills or visualization skills, whatever it is. And if you reply and you've got those headings and you're talking about those skills, then it makes it really easy for them to go, oh yes, this person has these skills that we're looking for. We're going to give them an interview. So I know it's a bit of work, but it's really important to tailor your CV for each job application, or even think about rewriting it each time. You can copy and paste stuff, of course, but the key point is a lot of people, I think, just have one CV and they send that CV to every job that they're applying for. And, if that isn't always the best idea. So try and avoid doing that. Another really important thing with CVs is that you need to differentiate yourself. So what do I mean by that? Well, I read a lot of CVs, and this is the kind of thing that happens. A lot of people send me CVs, and their first paragraph is an introduction about themselves, and 90% of them say things like, I'm really passionate about the environment, and that's great, and we're all passionate about the environment. We're all geographers, right? So we love the environment, but I know that you're going to say that because everybody else says that. So it's not grabbing my attention. It's not making a difference to anyone else. And then some of the other things which are a bit of a bugbear of mine is when people give me a list of software that they've used, which is, it's kind of ArcGIS, ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Pro, FME, but it's just a bullet point of software. And I don't know, ArcGIS is a big piece of software. It's got lots of modules. You can do all sorts of great stuff with it. So I don't know if you're talking about a tiny little bit of ArcGIS or a massive part of ArcGIS. So the way to deal with that is to tell me a bit more, give me some evidence of the kinds of things that you've done with that software, and that explain what the objective of what you were doing is, which aspects of the software did you use, and then what were the outcomes? What were the results? Like, doesn't have to be massive. I don't want an essay, but just a bullet point or a sentence kind of explaining what you've actually done. And this doesn't need to be job experience either. It can be assignments that you've done as part of your university coursework. So, yeah. Another really important thing with CVs is words have power, and you've got to use positive words. So, of course, a true superhero is never going to be dishonest, but imagine a situation where you have two team members who worked on exactly the same piece of work, exactly the same company, and they get to the end of their contract and they both have to look for a new job. And if the imposter syndrome character here puts into their CV, I was an assistant, my job was mainly data entry, entering forest polygons, and someone else who was doing exactly the same thing wrote something like, I worked as part of a team creating data to assist with generating sustainable products for a multinational forestry corporation. That sounds much better. And these two characters here, if they were both doing exactly the same thing, but one of the wording in the second case is much more expressive and much more detailed, but also much more positive, and they're not actually lying about anything. They're telling the truth, but it's just the way that they've written it can be so much different. And I quite often get this with job applications where a lot of the applicants have kind of written, they don't want to push themselves, so they don't want to sort of seem like they've got a big ego or something like that. But just the way that you word things, it can be super critical, and so you really need to think about it. And without being, I don't want anyone out there to be dishonest or lie about anything, but at the same time, there's ways that you can word things which sound a lot better. So, really go and look at your CV if you've got one at the moment, and think about how you could reword things to really accentuate your strengths. So this leads me on to quite a common question that I get from a lot of students, which is, what happens if I don't actually have that much real job experience? So there's quite a few ways that you can deal with that. One of the main ways is the assignments that you've done as part of your university coursework. That's an activity. One really important thing to think about if you're still a student is to make notes, keep records of your assignments and what you did. And quite often, if you did something in your first year of university, you forget, right, what it was that you did, and you can't access all of your old coursework or whatever, or you lost it or something like that. So just keep a short note somewhere of what your assignments were, what software you used, what the objective was, what the outcomes were, what grades you got. But being able to summarize some of that information into your CV is one way that you can deal with things if you haven't got that much real world job experience. You can also look at things like volunteering. So here in New Zealand, we have an organisation called GIS and Conservation, which gets a lot of people with GIS skills and matches them with not-for-profit organisations, and we support environmental activities through that program. So unfortunately, generally it's not paid, but it's still getting some experience that you can then put on your CV to get some to show that you have done some work. Other things that you can do is start publishing some blog posts and things about things that interest you in GIS, and sort of get your name out there into the industry a little bit by doing things like that. So another real bugbear that I have, sometimes if you may be working or have worked at a supermarket, or in my case, I used to work at McDonald's, and it is absolutely valid to put on a GIS CV those other jobs that you've had, and whatever jobs they are, whether it's supermarket, cleaning the street, it doesn't matter. Include it, particularly when you're just starting out in your career. But one thing to not do is please don't tell me what all of the detail of a role of working at McDonald's or what a supermarket cashier does, because I know, I'm a fairly intelligent guy, right? And so writing paragraphs about what you've done in these types of roles is wasting precious space in your CV that I want to hear about other things. I do want to see that you've got a bit of job experience and the duration that you've spent working somewhere. That's all great. But I don't need to be told what a McDonald's worker's duties are. I can figure it out myself. Thank you. So that's really one thing which kind of annoys me quite a bit when I get CVs and there's a lot of paragraphs about roles that aren't relevant to GIS. And on that point, you might have noticed there that I had a certificate there from 1990 working McDonald's All-Star regional champion of front counter from, 35 years ago. So I actually have, just to show you, this is my box of all of my certifications and qualifications and things like that. Hopefully people can see that on the camera. So, I have in here, I actually have that certificate from 35 years ago. I've got emails in here from 20 years ago where one of my managers congratulated me on a successful project. I've got letters from the principal at my high school congratulating me on excellent results. I'll save all of that stuff, your performance reviews, your job descriptions from jobs that you've done, save all of that stuff somewhere because you never know when it's going to be useful, right? So I know it might not make that much sense to people, me holding on to a certificate from McDonald's 35 years ago. But imagine if I wanted to go for a job as a manager of GIS at McDonald's and I could go to them and say, hey, I've got all of this GIS experience, but did you know I actually worked at McDonald's 35 years ago and I got this certificate at the time? So that it's probably fairly unlikely that I'm going to apply for that job at McDonald's, but it could happen. So think about gathering all of that evidence. Other things that you can think about doing is just searching for things like GICV New Zealand. And if you do that, there's a whole lot of examples of what other people have done. So you can get some good ideas and you can change this to different countries that you want to apply to. And quite a few recruitment companies actually put out what they think is good examples of these things so that people can copy that. Well, not completely copy it, obviously, but got to change the content to what you've done. But you can get some ideas about good layouts and approaches that people have taken. And in your CV, weird fonts and fancy formatting, just don't do that. Just keep it pretty plain because some people there was a trend a few years ago where people were printing CVs on pink coloured paper and all sorts of things like that. Might grab the attention of a few GIS managers, but it would also turn off a lot of the others. So, don't take risks with trying to be too fancy with what the formatting of your CV. So the other aspect of CVs is the cover letter. So that's where you can write a letter that goes along with your CV. That's a good place to put things like your aspirations. And one really good thing to put in that cover letter is why you would want to work for this particular organisation that you're applying to. But a couple of warnings about those covering letters. First warning is some managers, particularly GIS managers, don't always read the cover letter. If they've got 100 applications to get through and there's cover letters with some of them, they're going to look at the CV first. And so they might not even read that cover letter. So don't put your key strengths into that cover letter because they might get skipped over. Other employers will they will look at your cover letter, but only once they've read your CV and decided that they want some more information about you, and then they'll look at the cover letter. So that's probably enough from me, and I'm going to hand you over to Dr. K, who's going to talk to you about some other things about GIS careers.
Oh, many thanks, Nathan. That was wonderful. Good to get your wisdom here. I've got a couple things to share here, folks, that I hope are informative and inspiring. First of all, this whole idea of creating a story map of your CV or resume. Now, my colleagues and I on the ESRI education team, we are very passionate about GIS and career pathways and education. So we have a zone called the ESRI education blog. So if you do a search on my last name, Kerski, ESRI education blog, you'll see all kinds of things that I've written over the years. But one of the ones that actually has been the most popular is this essay right here. Create a story map of your CV or resume. Some of you know that story maps are web mapping applications in this ArcGIS platform. They're easily configured, they're fun to use, and there are over 4 million story maps globally that people have created since 2010. So they're very popular for a variety of reasons. But pertinent to our discussion today, creating a story map of your CV or resume. Why do this? A, not everybody does it. B, it gets you in touch with web-based GIS tools. C, it's fun to do. D, every time you update it, you can include new story maps tools that you haven't tried before. So it shows your future employer that you know something about WebGIS. Now, certainly there are other platforms, there are other ways to create a web-based CV that is interactive, but I'll just show you a couple of examples that I have linked to this particular essay. I've got examples from a variety of people all over the world, and if you just do a search on these terms, you'll find this essay, and I can also put it in the chat box in a bit. One is from Amanda Huber. Amanda is a GIS professional and is part of the Young Professionals Network at ESRI. So that's another thing in terms of networking. Join the ESRI YPN. It's free, it's a vibrant community, it's global. So Amanda's got some things in here about what she did, where she went to school, what kinds of web mapping applications she created over the course of her academic, but also her professional career. And so you can see there's a sort of an immersive kind of effect here. I've got my own in here as well, so I'm practicing what I'm preaching. I did the same thing as I am advocating that you do. Hey, landscapes, things I'm passionate about. I love big maps. Here I am pointing at Denver, which is where I am right now in Colorado, USA. But I would highly encourage you that inside that story map CV or resume, you include at least one interactive web map that shows here's what you did in various places around the world, even if it's just on your campus or in your community. It doesn't have to be global. But over here, I had this internship. I went to university here. I had this job over here that I did this. So include one interactive map in your story map CV. Now, I have a traditional CV as well. I'm violating all rules that Nathan expostulated about 20 minutes ago. Mine is actually 22 pages long. I've got just about every single article and stuff that I've written, but I don't float that in front of people, but I have it. There's sort of my archive that I pull things from when I apply for different jobs. So I have a traditional kind of a CV, as you can see here, with education, publications, etc. But I also have, as you just saw, a page with my CV, traditional CV, and also my story map. So that's one thing that I encourage you to do. Another thing that comes to mind that as Nathan and I were talking about this, why engage with geotechnologies in the first place? Why think about the pathway that you all took to get to this moment here in December 2024 when you're watching this webinar. Now, I briefly mentioned, I'm not going to bore you to tears with my own background, but I briefly mentioned my background earlier. Federal agencies, academia, private industry with ESRI, and nonprofit organizations. So this is my own pathway, but think about the pathway and the unique skills that you have that nobody else actually has with your exact pathway. Treasure those moments. Like Nathan said, even the things that are non-GIS, think about the management, the financial, the accounting, whatever else you did in those other GIS those other roles. Oftentimes when people apply for Eagle Technologies or ESRI Inc., they discount all that. Oh, I wasn't a GIS, so I'm not even going to include that. But like Nathan is encouraging you, Think about, hey, that brought you some unique experiences that perhaps nobody else had. But here's why we engage with geotechnologies. Yes, we're focused on career pathways today. And sure, it's a viable, wonderful community that you are either part of or you're thinking about joining as you journey forward in your own career. But more importantly than even that, or the other things that I have listed here, spatial thinking, critical thinking, systems thinking, getting people to realize that all of the ecosphere, the atmosphere, the biosphere, the anthroposphere, the human sphere, they're all connected. And so we need to think holistically. All those are key reasons why geotechnologies are important. But the most important reason is because it is absolutely essential to solve all of our world's complex challenges, right? From local scale in your own community to the global scale. All the UN SDGs, right? The Sustainable Development Goals, water, energy, transportation, climate, natural hazards, you name it, right? They're all spatial. And hence, GIS can help us to grapple with and understand and solve those key 21st century issues. So it is vitally important to our planet that we have people that are knowledgeable about geospatial technology, but also remember, coming back to what Nathan was saying, spatial thinking, right? That this tool right here is the most important tool to nurture going forward. Yes, you're gaining key skills in software and management, et cetera. But remember this tool right here, your own brain. The other thing that I wanted to mention here is that I wanted to encourage you all to develop some rich and deep content knowledge, whether it's water or soil moisture or erosion or natural hazards or city planning. You're developing some deep content knowledge. And Eagle, ESRI, other organizations that Nathan and I have worked for in the past and at present, they value people with that content knowledge. In other words, the skills are important. And the skills don't just include geotechnology skills, remote sensing, GIS, GNSS, right? They include skills on forming and solving a problem, working with a team, communicating the results of your research, etc., right? Those are skills as well. Don't just focus on the GIS skills, but don't neglect that content knowledge. You've got a rich and deep content knowledge that you're developing in one or two areas that you're really expert in. And then the left side, the geographic perspective, I think is important because, again, we want people to focus. But one of the challenges I see in our 21st century world is people get oftentimes into their own zone, and they are very good at their own zone, but they're not thinking about other sectors that are impacted or impact their own zone of knowledge. So keep that broader perspective going. That is one of the advantages, and that's one of the key reasons why GIS was created in the first place. So we could look at lots of different facets of our natural and human-built world, right? So keep that left side prominent, even though more and more people in geospatial technologies do not come into this through the traditional geo-enviro GI science route, right, Nathan? Increasingly, people are coming into this in business or computer science or data science or city planning or some other field. And they find out about GIS and they want to attach it to their tool belt. So that's good. It's diversifying, it's widening the array of people that are in this field. But even if people are not well grounded in geography and environmental studies and GI science, the geographic perspective actually matters. So I wanted to encourage you that this stool of geoliteracy actually rests on all three of these legs. And finally, before I turn it back over to Nathan, I'm going to just briefly, ever so briefly, cover these, what I consider to be 5 most important skills. Now, I'm also going to put here in the chat box in a moment the story map that I have, what I'm drawing from, the content that I'm drawing from right now. It's actually in a story map. So you can actually explore the things that I'm not covering on your own. Okay. And we'll also have this recording posted as well. But the 5 most important skills, these are debatable. They could be up for discussion. They definitely should be up for discussion. They're sort of like the 5 coolest bands of all time, right, Nathan? The 5 coolest places in New Zealand to visit before you pass away. You know, they're somewhat debatable, but I just submit to you all that these are 5 to chew on. And that first one, asking questions, is tied to being curious about your world. That's the kind of employees that are most treasured and valued. The people that can ask questions, maybe that even their supervisor's not even asking them to ask. Ooh, and when some of you are in university right now, ask questions that your professor's not even asking you. And that ties to this whole geographic inquiry process. The second one is being able to work with data. No surprise probably to most of you, but geospatial technologies has always been big data, right, Nathan? We've always been about the data. oh, let's have satellite imagery, let's have real-time data feeds, et cetera. So being able to be working conversely in a conversant way with data. I've got a blog called the Spatial Reserves Data Blog that I update every 2 weeks. It's about where to find data, how to know if it's any good, can I trust it, and societal issues like copyright, location privacy, ethics. Mapping is a very ethical activity. It requires you to be thoughtful about how you're presenting your results to people, could be globally, with these web mapping applications. So being able to work with data and being critical of it, especially in the modern age where everybody is a data creator, not just the Eagle Technologies and the ESRIs and the National Geographics and the United Nations Environment Program. You are a data creator. You can share your data and content with others. And understanding your geoscience foundations and geotechnical foundations, map projections, how to represent data, how to build a geodatabase, that's all important as well. And fourth, be an adaptable, lifelong learner. That's why you folks are in the webinar today, right? You're taking time out. We very much appreciate you taking time out to learn from each other and from us. And we'll learn from you as well. There's lots of resources that we'll share at the end about how do you keep going with this. Massive open online courses and some other resources that we'll talk about. And fifth, nurturing your communication skills. Now, on my Our Earth channel, which has 7,000 videos, I'm very passionate about all this, folks. Don't torture yourself with watching all 7,000 of my videos, but I do have a subset that is me in actual elevators giving my 1 minute, my 2 minute, my 5 minute elevator speech. Why is that important? First of all, make it your own voice. Don't make it Joseph's voice, but you're welcome to use mine as, some sort of inspiration. But because geospatial technologies are all around us, it's partly confusing to upper management sometimes or others that are hiring you. Hey, I've got Google Maps on my phone. Why do I need you to work for me? Right? So be able to articulate why this stuff matters, and also articulating this, right, Nathan, in a way that's non-technical to certain groups of people that you're working with, maybe the HR people that Nathan talked about earlier. My skills will help your organization save money, be more energy efficient, be more sustainable. And here's how. In other words, you're using bigger, more noble goals that the organization has, which actually requires you to do some homework on that organization. So I'm going to close it off there with those 5 skills. I hope that's helpful. I'm turning it back over to Nathan now. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, Joseph. Actually, there's some questions that have come up in the questions which we gave people an opportunity to ask as part of the registration process for this event. And also a similar question from Jace in Seattle about the 7,000 videos, quite a few videos to get through, probably not going to be able to do all of them. But along that lines, there are skills that people can develop in GIS. There's also skills that people can develop in IT. There's also skills that people can develop in forestry or defence or emergency management. And quite a common question that people have is, should they be focusing on getting a GISP, or should they be focusing on getting some qualifications to do with, Microsoft Azure or cloud hosting, or should they be focusing on developing skills in a particular industry sector? So my kind of take on that is this is where you have a degree of choice that you can determine whether you want to be a developer. And, if you want to take that route through GIS, then that's going to steer you towards certain courses and things that you can do. But if you want to be a cartographer and you're not so interested in the back end side of GIS and integrations with other systems and all that kind of thing, then that will take you on a different course in terms of your skills that you want, and maybe a GISP might be more in line with that type of job. So you kind of need to work out what it is that you want to do, but also if there's a market for those skills and where the skills requirements are across the industry. So I wonder what your thoughts are on that, Joseph.
Yeah, I've got this badge here, folks. I actually have the GISP. And I think it's helpful. It shows that you're serious about GIS. It's not for everyone, and some employers, to be honest, don't really care about those things. Many of them do, though. So getting you have to weigh the costs and benefits, right? There's time involved, there's a fee to take the exam, but it does show, I think, and I love the GIS Certification Institute. I know all of the people on that team, and they have done a very nice job in structuring that exam so that it's approachable and doable. And there's also an ethics statement. I talked about ethics earlier. You have to sign an ethics statement. So it shows that you're thinking thoughtfully about not just the technology, but how you're going to use it and how you're going to communicate with it in a way that's not misleading, that is clear, and helps people understand their situation with their community or their world a little bit better. So I do think that those certifications, the ESRI certifications, are also valuable to some employers. We've got a series of ESRI intro, intermediate, advanced certifications that you can take. There's also, of course, Nathan and I work with lots of universities around the world that offer 3, 4, 5 course sequences to get your certificate in geospatial technology. They're nice and affordable in many cases, less so than a full degree. And again, many employers care about having that certification. But there's also free options. The massive open online courses from ESRI and others are, I think, rigorous, valuable, fun, and relevant to our 21st century. So in short, I would say yes, but it in part depends on, doing your homework on that organization. Would they value that sort of certification? And if so, should you invest the time and oftentimes money in pursuing it?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Joseph. Another really important thing, particularly when you're starting out in the industry, is to grow your network, your professional network, the people that you have, all of the people that you meet in meetings or you go to events, all of that kind of thing. Start making contact with people in the senior industry as soon as you can if you're a student. There's lots of opportunities to do that. You can, in New Zealand, we have a few professional networking groups. One that I'm quite involved with is called the Emerging Spatial Professionals, which is similar in some ways to the Young Professionals Network from ESRI that Joseph spoke about before. There's also the Vanguard Cabinet from EURISA. So they're looking at students and recent graduates and giving them their first steps to networking in the industry. There's also Women in Spatial and Women in GIS groups out there, and we have the Maori GIS group here in New Zealand for Indigenous people. So there's another great one is actually until recently it was called EURISA, but they're changing the name at the moment to the Geospatial Professionals Network. So they do a lot of web meetups or in-person meetups, and quite often these are for free. Some of them aren't, but a lot of them are. So, these are opportunities to meet some people in the industry and ask questions and start making those contacts. And LinkedIn is another great resource. So, feel free after the session to send me a connection request. I'm sure Joseph wouldn't mind as well if you've got an interest in GIS. We love connecting with people. And then you can follow us and kind of see if we publish something interesting. And we'll be following you as well. So if you publish something interesting, that's another great way, using those social media tools to start building up your networks. Anytime that you meet anyone to do with GIS, try and get connected with them on LinkedIn. And who knows, maybe you're chatting to somebody by a water cooler at an event, and then 6 months later, you might go and apply for a job with that person. So it's those kinds of things which are really great tools. So now, if you've done all your CV work and you've got an interview, fantastic. What are you going to do now? So important things with interviews is the preparation for it. So some of the things that you can do is a lot of interviewers, they've got a script of questions that they're going to run through, and a lot of those questions, they're all the same. What are your strengths? Tell me about a weakness. All of these things. So you can Google that and find out what some of those likely questions are. And one thing which I might just stop sharing for a second so I can show you this. One thing which I used to do when I was going into interviews was I'd taken a notebook and pen with me, and I have this in front of me on the desk or something like that. But I'd actually have notes on my page about what my strengths are, so that I'd remember them in the pressure of an interview. And be able to talk about them. And if I got stuck on a question or something, I could just look down and look at my notes and figure out something that I was going to say. So I actually did a mind map at one point of all of my kind of strengths and things that I've done and things which I wanted to talk about, and had this in front of me so that I could, and it doesn't have to be printed out like that, you can just do it in pen, but having in front of you those strengths in the interview so you can remember them, so that when a question comes up, you can look down quickly and go, oh yes, that's right. That's when I did something which demonstrates that particular strength. So, taking in some notes with you ahead of time is really handy, particularly, I am not the best public speaker in the world. I've actually joined Toastmasters, which is great if you're not good at public speaking. Another great thing to do to develop those communication skills that Joseph was talking about. But I also got nervous in interviews. So having some notes in front of me just helped to calm my nerves. And I didn't, you don't want to go into the interview and be looking down the whole time and reading off a sheet, because the people looking at you are going to realize that's what you're doing. But just as a backup, it gives you a bit of confidence. And if you get really stuck, then you can kind of look down and figure something out quickly and have something to say. So that's a tip from me. Another thing that you can think about doing when you're getting interviews, particularly if it's your first time that you've done real job interviews, is try and practice. Practice just makes everything so much easier. And one way that you can, and so that also applies to job interviews. So if you have someone that you can ask to do a dummy interview with you, ideally not your parents or somebody who's too close to you, but maybe one of your neighbours, if they are a manager of a company or something like that, or a friend of the family or a friend of your parents, something like that, if they can take half an hour to practice an interview with you, and particularly if they're a manager and they actually do real hiring, then just doing that and getting that experience, even if it's a mock experience, it just makes it easier for you to be more relaxed when you actually do go into that real interview. So that's a really great thing to do when you're getting ready for an interview. Another thing which we've had a lot of questions about is if you want to emigrate and work. So there's a few important notes about this. One is this expectations around CVs and the layouts and so on it varies a lot between different countries. So some countries, really expect just a short kind of 2-page long CV. Others are fine with a 5-page CV. So figuring out what's relevant in particular countries is quite important. You also need to look at the immigration rules and regulations and laws. Sometimes for a lot of countries it can be quite difficult to be able to work in a different country. So, and I get quite a lot of applications from people overseas who they don't have the necessary qualifications for the government. Even if I wanted to hire them, I can't, because our government has said that they need to meet certain criteria in order to come to our country to work. So if you do want to go to a different country to work, one of the important things to do is find out from looking at government websites and things like that, whether you have the right qualifications and things to be able to actually work in that country. And if you do, then noting those things and sending that as part of your cover letter for any job applications that you want to make. One of the things you need to do is make it as easy as possible for the employer to be able to employ you. So if you put somewhere that, hey, I'm eligible for this type of work visa in your country, and I've looked at, this is the website of your government that tells you that I have this qualification and this is where they can look it up, then that just makes it easier for them to be able to hire you. So definitely, I get a lot of applications where people aren't ever going to be able to come and work for me unless they go and get certain qualifications. So, it's not worth me really reading their CVs if I can tell straight away that they won't be able to come and work here. So you need to figure out those things and figure out how you can get sponsored to get a visa or a green card or whatever it is to be able to work in that country. If you have the right qualifications and university skills, amazing. Please send in your application. But if you don't, then that's you need to go and get those qualifications first.
Oh, many thanks, Nathan. Well, greetings, folks. I've got a couple things to share here as we wind toward the more of the questions and answers that Nathan and I had planned that this would be a suitable time to do this. First of all, this is a rapidly changing environment, geospatial technologies. The world needs you. They need these spatial critical thinkers, holistic thinkers. That's what you're bringing to bear in these organizations. We could talk about, again, a debatable list of 5 trends, but we had a question in the Q&A about 10 minutes ago about the last one on this list of mine. And again, you see this list. I'm not going to spend time reading these, but these are some forces that, you might want to say, okay, how do I fit in? Do I know about any of these forces, these trends? AI and machine learning. Now, AI has been a part of GIS for at least a dozen years. Now, though, there's an increased demand from everywhere from wastewater to city planning and others to develop additional AI-driven GIS tools. So we are creating more in the ArcGIS platform. Right now, I've got a Geo AI workshop that I've shared with one of the people that was asking this, and I can share it in the general chat here in a moment. But it basically has 3 components: extracting features from imagery, creating a field survey in Survey 123 with an AI assistant, and also in Business Analyst Web saying, give me a bivariate map of median age and median income in this area by enumeration district. Done. There are many implications for AI in teaching and learning and also in your use of GIS. I think it's going to make, it already has made most of the GIS job day-to-day functions faster and more interesting because you're moving more toward the analytics rather than collecting data. You've got AI tools that automatically extract every single tree, boat, airplane on the ground, cable box, house, etc. from an image. You don't have to spend days, weeks, months collecting that by hand. This tool is still important. So when you're running those AI-driven tools inside ArcGIS or any other GIS platform, you still need to be thoughtful about what is the metadata. Do I understand what the metadata is? Do I understand what the AI model was built on, etc.? And you can also generate your own AI models in GIS too. So it's an exciting time and definitely something to keep in close tabs on, as well as BIM, CAD, Building Information Management, Computer-Aided Drafting, and GIS, the merging of the interior space mapping with the exterior space mapping. I would just say, look at those trends, find out if you've got any gaps in your own knowledge, and then how do you fill those gaps with some of the resources we're going to share at the end here. Another thing that I wanted to share was 5 quick resources. We've gotten some feedback in the chat box and in the Q&A about how do I get more toes into these waters? I already mentioned my spatial reserves data book and blog. There's one post about even be critical of images. Sometimes they're manipulated in various ways, and you need to be critical of what you're seeing and understand what wavelength and what resolution, et cetera, that you're looking at it in. Offsets on imagery, et cetera. There's also a set of Living Atlas of the World, the ArcGIS Living Atlas of the World, which has 9,000 data layers in it. There's an app zone, wildfire perimeters, ecological marine units, biomes, etc. Wayback imagery, we can look at Landsat Explorer. You can look back at 50 years of Landsat historical imagery and see how things have changed and why they're changing. So fascinating, no login required. I would highly recommend spending some time with those fascinating Living Atlas of the World apps. Another one to take a look at is something I touched on earlier, using these tools in collaboration and in conjunction with each other. Collect data in the field. With Survey 123, it gets fed into a web map. That gets fed into a dashboard, and then you wrap the whole thing in a story map. So I've got a walkability example, but by extension, you could collect noise, tree species, et cetera. So spend some time with these tools and how powerful they are when these configurable, easy to use apps are all connected for some power. Okay. The best tool to use, we've also gotten this in the chat box and in the Q&A. This is an old Mac that some of you might recognize, unless you're probably many of you are younger than Nathan and I. But the point is, take our word for it. This is an old computer. Why is it a doorstop now? The point I'm making here is that the tools evolve, right? Don't get too tied to the version X of software Y. Sure, the software is important. The device, the hardware is important, but they will evolve. Again, keep this tool nurtured and moving forward. And that's another. We've also talked about certificates and certifications and the importance of networking. So that's just a few things that I wanted to share there. The other thing, the last thing, I promised I turned it over to Nathan here to talk about resources and other things. This also came up in the chat box in the Q&A. You're spending a lot of time in your career. I love this diagram from the Japanese. Get at the intersection as many days as you can on the job with what you love to do, what does the world need, what you're good at, and what can you be paid for so you can provide for yourself and your family. The point is, am I at the center of that every day on the job? No, but choose something that gets you close to the center on many of your hours that you're spending in your career, because it is a lot of hours. So pick something you're passionate about that you're not going to be constantly watching the clock saying is it quitting time. That's what I highly recommend. I'm going to turn it back over to Nathan to talk about some resources going forward, and I'll chime in as well, Nathan. Nathan, I noticed when you were gesturing, you've got this brace, this cast on your arm. What's going on?
Yeah, my skateboarding superpowers deserted me, Joseph. So that's the story with that. Concrete is my kryptonite, unfortunately. Yeah,
Okay.
so we'll try and just start to wrap things up here. Sorry if we're going slightly over time. One thing which I think we need to recognise is that some people, it can be hard out there in the employment market, and it can be hard to get your first GIS job. So some of the things which I would say about that is, you have to just keep going. You have to keep looking at the training opportunities. One thing which you can think about doing is getting a job. If there's an organisation that you really want to work for, a local government organisation, for example, sometimes you have to get a different job than the one that you want with that organisation. So quite a good way of getting here at Auckland Council, for example, you might get a job, working as a park ranger or doing some other role at that organisation to begin with, and then that can be sort of a foot in the door to then apply to the GIS team when a GIS role comes up. So sometimes targeting an organisation that you want to work for, getting a different job with them, proving that you can do that job well, getting to know the GIS manager maybe, and then applying when they have a position open. That's one way of dealing with that situation. Some other ways that Eagle helps with these things. So we have an internship program and some student experiences. They're on Eagle's website. We also have a short professional training course called the GallupX program, which again, you can look up on Eagle's website if you're interested in that. And as Joseph has mentioned, one of my geospatial superheroes is the fantastic Dawn Wright, and she has put together and hosts a great climate change MOOC, it's a massive online course. It's free, and you get more experience with using all of those GIS tools, and anyone around the world can log into that. I did it myself last year. So, talking about continuous, and I really enjoyed it. Continuous education, even after 30 years working in the geospatial industry, still learning even now, still doing cool things like this MOOC with Dawn Wright's secret superhero name, Deep Sea Dawn. So look her up after the session. She's fantastic. And I'll hand you back over to Joseph to talk about some of the other resources.
Well, absolutely, folks. We're just on the hour right now, and I put some things that I was actually going to show in a slide just in the chat box here. I'm happy to show those as well if Nathan thinks it's appropriate. But the ESRI MOOCs, the learn.arcgis.com set of lessons, I'll put that in there as well.
Keep going for a few minutes if you want to, Joseph. If
okay.
People are able to stay on.
Sure.
Yeah.
We don't have very many of these MOOCs, folks, and I'm going to share screen here real fast. And the reason why is we want to do them well, and we want to provide a rich and deep learning experience for folks. And this isn't the end all be all, but we have about 6 of them or so at any one time during each year. Climate, you can see spatial analysis cartography with Ken Field, who wrote a book for Esri Press on that very subject. They're fun, they're rigorous, they're 6 weeks long, they're challenging. They get you thinking for sure. But the reason why you can't, like, unlike many of the other resources that I shared in the chat box, these are much like a university course where you actually go through with a cohort. That's why we don't just offer them anytime you want to take them. They're actually, as you can see here, at set times. So you actually build a network with the people going through the MOOC at the same time. So that's the idea there. They're not just learning on your own. You're having discussion with your fellow cohort. So that is a key resource. The other one that I wanted to share here is that depending on the tools you're using, your list will be different from mine, perhaps in some ways. But I almost always look at the what's new in underscore whatever tool you're using. So for Esri, for example, what's new in story maps? What's new in Survey 123? What's new in field maps? What's new in spatial analytics? I look at those. They come out every quarter. Do a search every quarter. Just put a reminder to yourself, or you can subscribe to some of the Esri newsletters. So you get an auto email. But look at least skim those. You don't have to read every word, but it gets you knowledgeable about what's new in these different tools that you're using or want to use in the future. So that's something that I always do every quarter. And finally, I would just say I salute you folks. Nathan and I get questions about, are there textbooks? Are there other things that are, sure, there are still ways of learning that are multi-modal, right? And textbooks still have a role. The textbooks that are tied to software versions are always a bit challenging because they're slightly out of date. But as we talked about in some of the Q&A and the chat, when you get toes into the waters of certain tools, they're going to be able to be transferred to other tools. So don't worry too much about the version of the software you're using or the actual software you're using. If it works for you, if it's useful, use it. And
It's
you'll
the
be able
geographic concepts that are the important
exactly,
thing, and
yes. Yep.
they stay around for a long time. It's those fundamental things of understanding the different geographic processes and software functions that are available, and then new software is going to add new functionality on top of that. So, if you have that basis of those geographic concepts down really well, then that's critical. Yeah.
I'm right with you. We've got some resources in the chat box. And Nathan, will you be able to save that chat and include it somehow in a document that accompanies the
Sure.
recording?
Yeah.
We can figure out that.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much for listening to us today, and good luck out there with your careers. And certainly, Joseph and I hope to bump into you one day at a conference or something. Please come and say hello, and hopefully you've learned a few things today, and do connect with us on LinkedIn and start building your network beginning with us. So thanks everyone, and it's been great talking to you as ever, Dr. K, and great to see you, and good luck out there, team. Thanks.
Thank you, Nathan. I always learn so much from you. It was wonderful. And folks, I'm sorry we didn't get to every single one of the questions. We left a few, but you know how to get a hold of us. Feel free to email us or contact us on LinkedIn, and we'll address the remaining ones that we didn't get to during the webinar. But it was a joy. Thanks for joining us. Map on.
Bye, everyone.